Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
This is, of course, moving right into chapter 49, which is getting so close to the end of Genesis, but also this passage, this poetry, and this very difficult area of this quote, Jacob's blessing, more of a prophecy as to the future of the tribes, and maybe some reference to the past as well. So you can see how our interpreters are working overtime to try and understand what's being said here. So we had, just to review for a moment, that verse 1, Vayikra Yaakov el banav, Jacob summoned his sons, Vayomer, and he said, He'asfu ve'agida lachem et asher, gather together, and I will tell you that asher yikra etchem, which will befall you ba'acharit hayamim, in the latter days. And we have a parallel passage right here, which just screams out that this is poetic language. So because parallelism is exactly understood as certainly biblical poetry. Hikaptsu, again, gather together, come together. V'shim'u bnei Yaakov, and listen, O sons of Jacob. V'shim'u el Yisrael al avichim. So there's another parallelism right here buried into this parallel second verse. Listen, hearken to Israel, your father, right? Gather, Shim'u bnei Yaakov, Shim'u el bnei el avichem, Yisrael avichem, right? So you can see the parallel in meaning right there. And I'm wondering to myself if, in some ways, the reason for the parallel statements is to indicate that more is being said that isn't being said, that the need to say something and to be repeated is, there's several reasons, at least two that I can think of offhand. One is its importance, that when something's important, very often you'll repeat it, and certainly if it's near and dear to your heart. And another reason is because you're struggling to find a way to say what you want to say, and possibly by repeating it, you can kind of get across what you're trying to say. So just some ideas behind the whole form of parallelism.
I would point out that the first word there, he'asfu,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Is, I mean, to my ear, it's a little bit weaker than hikavtsu. It's like hikavtsu is a stronger group. An asefa is a gathering, but a kvutsa is a group.
Right. They both have the denotation of coming together, but right. I mean, as to connotation, you're picking up a connotation there. And it certainly could be a stronger emphasis the second time. So interesting, right? But if you really wanted to drill down a little bit, Bnei Yaakov, sons of Jacob, Yisrael avichem, Israel your father, right? Sons, fathers, it's the same kind of idea, but we're looking at the relationship. What's the relationship of a son to a father? What's the relationship of a father to a son? So just some various thoughts that go into there. On to, no Rashi on this. Reuven. So he starts off with the oldest. Reuven, Bechori Ata. Reuven, you are my firstborn. Kochi, my strength. Bereshit Oni, right? And the first of my, and again, it's got the same idea in here, and Rashi will tell you, it's not a common word. On meaning strength again, right? Vigor, if you want to look for synonyms, and that's basically how one tries to meet the challenge of poetry here, right? So Reshit Oni, the first of my vigor. Yeter Seit, preeminent in rank. Now, Seit means to go up, to move upwards, something like that. So preeminent in rank is a translation that I found in Safaria that I'm comfortable, certainly comfortable with. But Seit means to oh gosh, I'm trying to think of a good word. But it means like to try and go upwards, something to try and work towards. The yeter as preeminent, we're going to use the same word here, yeter as power, strength, right? So we'll take a look. The idea of the firstborn. And here we go. Just one word on this page, vaYechi, right? And the first of, here we go, Oni, right? My vigor. And here's Rashi now. Hayahi tiparishona. So Oni Rashi understands as meaning the first drop rishona shelo. In other words, the first drop of sperm of his. Shelo ra'a keri miyamav. The story is that Jacob, part of Jacob's holiness was that he never masturbated, he never spilled seed. Remember, we had that story of Onan and with Judah's sons, Er and Onan, and the idea of spilling sperm, spilling seed, because the purpose, of course, is for procreation. And so there's this sense of purpose, and not doing it is seen as something against God in a way, right? I'm saying it that way to understand that the how this is being seen, and the idea here is that Reuven was the very first time that Jacob gave seed. So Oni, again, another attempt at this. And here he goes. Oni kochi, my strength, my vigor. Kamo, and he says, there's an example, Hosea Yudbet, in Hosea, chapter 12, prophet Hosea, Matzati on li, I found power for my strength, for myself, power for my strength. Sorry, power for myself. Forgive me. And then Isaiah chapter 40, Merov Onim, right? From many strong people. Okay, or maybe it could all mean mighty in power, something like that. Ula ein onim, here we go. No one, right? There is no one in power, no power. People who don't, the powerless, something like that. Yeter Seit, again, we said preeminent in the prominence, right? Ra'ui Hayita. So he's saying, this is what the point Rashi's saying that Jacob is making to Reuven. Ra'ui Hayita liyot yeter alachicha. It was proper, it was fitting that you have preeminence over your brothers. And we'll take a quick look at the Targum and see how Rashi's following it there. The kuhuna in priesthood, in other words, your family would have been made up the priesthood, lashon nisiat kapayim. So seit again means sort of moving upwards, something like that. And nisiat kapayim means lifting up your hands in blessing, right? So understood as being a mark of the priesthood. V'yeta oz, and preeminent in power, the malchut. And here we're now talking about the monarchy. So in having this position as Reuven, as being Jacob's firstborn, he would have been entitled to both the kahuna, the priesthood, and the monarchy. And we know that initially, of course, the firstborn were going to make up the Levites and the priests, and that all changed. because of what happened with the golden calf. At any rate, here is a statement as to saying, plan A versus plan B. And how does Yeter As be associated with the monarchy? He says, Shmuel Aleph, that's the first book of Samuel, chapter 2, Vayiten Oz lemalko. He gives strength to his king. And there's the Oz. Umi garam lacha, and what caused you, lahafsid kol ela, to lose all of this? In other words, because Reuven doesn't have any of these particular qualities or positions. What caused it? So here we are. Pachaz kamayim, unstable as water. Al totar, you shall not remain. But in this way, it can also, this totar also can refer to this yeter. You see how it's linked to this term yeter? You shall not remain preeminent. You shall not be preeminent. Ki alita mishkevei avicha, for you went up on your father's couch. And of course, this is the story of Bilhah that was referenced earlier on in Genesis. And here is Jacob mentioning this now. Az chilalta, at that point you disgraced, you profaned. Yitzu'i Allah, he went up on my, and there's matzia, has to do again with couch or bed or something like that. Rashi will explain this. Understand that all this Hebrew is not easy. The syntax isn't easy. The meaning of the words is not so easy either. I mean, this isn't terrible stuff, but it's just put together in a way where syntactically it's complicated and challenging. Let's take a quick look at, I said we'd take a quick look at the Targum here, okay? Here we go. Hava chaze, the misav talatachulkan. Right. So here's Onkelos going, and in situations like this where we're talking about poetry and where there's a lot of metaphor and it's the meaning isn't so clear, Onkelos has a field day in terms of interpretation. Right. He doesn't just translate; he also interprets. He would have deserved. It would have been fitting for him, the misav, to take. Tlata is three things, chulkin, three parts. Becheruta, that is the right of the firstborn. Kahunta, the priesthood. Umalchuta, and the monarchy. So you can see how Rashi is leaning on the Targum there. And the Targum itself quite possibly is leaning on material that's in Bereshit Rabbah, depending on what came earliest. And it could be that the Targum actually is even earlier. Bereshit Rabbah, if I'm not mistaken, is Amoraic, which would mean that it would be after the year 200. And I suspect that the Targum is quite early and earlier than that. It represents a product of that first exile where they were exiled to Babylonia by Nebuchadnezzar in 586. And I would think that they would have needed something like this relatively early on into that exile. Going into the Rashi now for this next verse. Pachas kamayim, right? So unstable as water. Pachas v'habehala, the recklessness and the agitation. These are references, as I mentioned before, to the Jastrow dictionary. I was actually getting into looking up words in the Jastrow to try and give you as clear a definition as I could, right? The recklessness and the agitation share in that miharta laharot ka'ascha, that you hurried to display your anger. Kamayim lahalalu, like this water, hamimaharim b'mirutzam, which flow swiftly. So that's how you can see how Rashi is really doing quite a beautiful job here of pulling out the meanings behind the words here. L'chach, and for this reason, al totar, you will not exceed. Right? Again, this word totar, you will not show preeminence. And it's so interesting, right? That self-control is like a very primary thing in leadership, to be able to master yourself before you gain mastery over others, or that you're entitled to mastery, quote, quote, over others. Al tarbe litol. Okay, so you will not be able to take kol hayiterot halalu, all these perquisites, is how I translated this. Yeter, again, means sort of entitlements, things that are greater. Yoter means more. That's the word that you use to mean more in Hebrew. So Tarbeh again has something to do with that you'll have the greatness, something. You won't have the greatness to take all these entitlements, these perquisites, alalu, shayu re'uyot lach, that you would have been entitled to. So you will not have the greatness. Umahu hapachaz asher pachazta, and what specifically was this recklessness that you displayed? Ki alitam mishkevei avicha, that you went up on the bed of your father, as chilalta, then you profaned, literally is what that means, right? Lechalel, chilul is the opposite of kadosh, right? You profaned. Oto Shem, okay, I believe, is this. So that name literally is what it is. She'Allah al Yitzui, because he mounted my couch. Sorry. Ator Shem She'Allah al Yitzui. That's the way we've got to read this. My apologies. That name referring to God, you'll see, who was above my couch. Vehi Hashchina, referring to the divine presence. And here we go. Shahaya darka liyot ole ola al yitzui, because it was its custom, its habit for the Shekhinah to be above, to go up over my couch. Which, again, that sort of is a very suggestive phrase, but I suspect that what it's talking about is that when Jacob was with his wives, that he did it in a very modest way. This idea of modesty in these intimate moments, to act in this modest way, which in a way, of course, is of the very definition of being God-fearing. Pachaz. So he says pachaz. It's not a verb. It could be. Pachaz sounds like a verb, but it isn't a verb. He says shem davarhu. It's a noun, okay, or an adjective here, I think. The name of something. So it could either mean a noun or an adjective. Okay. Lefichach, I think it's a noun, is what it is. Lefichach, and for this reason, ta'amo lamala, here it means its accent is, instead of pachaz, okay, it's pachaz. I don't know if you can hear the distinction. So pachaz means the accent's falling on the first syllable, and that's what he means by ta'amo lamala. And of course, we talk about Ta'amei Mikra as being the trope notes. And he's saying that's why the trope notes, you see the Maipach is under Pa. And so the location of these little marks has to do with where you place the accent, right? So for example, Ka Mayim. This is this particular trope note that where even it always occurs to tell you the identity of the note is that it occurs on the last letter. But this is where the accent falls. So al-totar. Okay, so pachas and not pachas. And notice that the vowels underneath, this is a patach, and this is exactly the same one. This is a patach. It's a short vowel, and it's an ah sound, as you could hear. Okay, let's see. Here we go. For lemala, v'chulo nakud patach. He's just telling us, and it's pointed with a patach. The entire word is pointed with a patach. Ve'ilu haya lashon avar. But if it was referring to the past tense, which is the form that the verb takes in the third person masculine singular past, he says, haya nakud chetzio kamatz. The first part of the first syllable of the word would be pointed with a kamatz, and that's this letter here, this sign here is a kamatz. Okay, and that is in fact, of course, the way one points the third person singular past tense in the kal form. I mean, this is getting into heavy grammar, I know. Okay, let's see here. Nakud chetzio kamatz vechetzio patach, and the second half of the second syllable would be a patach. The ta'amor lamata, and it would be pachaz. Right, and it's the ta'am would be on the second syllable. So he's just again the subtleties of translation and how knowledge of grammar and how this was pointed, right, makes a difference in terms of maybe a subtle difference, but nevertheless makes a distinction. So pachaz, right, would mean he was unstable. That's how we translate it. But pachaz like this means unstable as water. Maybe it's a subtle distinction, but nevertheless, it's a distinction. Yitsui. Okay, again, it's an unusual word for the common word for bed, which would be mita. Okay, and again, this has to do, my count, something like lashon mishkav, and he says this has the meaning, okay, of lying down, a place where you lie down, a couch. Al Shem, and for the reason why they use this word, it's got to do with shematzi in oto, because they spread over it al yedei levadim, felt blankets. So that's how, since this is a article of furniture over which you spread felt blankets under which you're going to sleep, possibly on top. Sadinim, it's a modern Hebrew word as well, meaning a sheet, sheets. V'harbe domim lo. He says there are many examples of the word yitzuah as meaning a bed or a couch. So he gives examples. Psalm 63, Im zacharticha al yitzui, if I make mention of you on my couch. And then Psalm 132, Im e'ele al eres, if I go up, if alight on my bed, yitzui, and again, it's got the same, it's simply a synonym, right? Eres yitzui means, honestly, it's my bed. Just both words basically mean bed. And this is going to be where we'll stop today. And so I'll put the marking in here. And I'm going to have to move this if I can. Okay, there we go. So I can see this. And in fact, that is Reuben's blessing, if we may call it that. So as I said, it's in some ways, it's more like a prophecy. And I'm going to stop the share. Any thoughts, any comments, any reactions to what's going on here? Okay, if this is the first time you're actually experiencing this, then of course it's quite a bit to experience. All right, we'll stop the recording here.